So, you want to be president. The odds aren't exactly in your favour, but hey, someone's got to win, right? Luckily, you've come to the right place. In total, there have been 60 US presidential elections, from George Washington winning in 1788 all the way up to Donald Trump in 2024. And just for you, I've gone ahead and analysed all of them to try and answer the question, how does one win the presidency? Here's what I found. Let's start with an obvious one. Win. Winning facilitates winning. Out of the 60 elections, the incumbent ran in 32 of them. From these, the incumbent won 69% of the time. It makes sense, doesn't it? With incumbency comes both familiarity and name recognition, and hence, unless it's a complete disaster, the electorate usually prefers to stick with the status quo. Naturally, this tendency is known as the status quo bias. Next, economy. Back in 1992, Democratic strategist James Carville famously coined the phrase, "It's the economy, stupid," while working on Bill Clinton's campaign. He wasn't wrong. Clinton, running against incumbent George H.W. Bush, capitalised on the early 90s recession to win the presidency. This wasn't a major surprise, as Bush's approval rating had slipped into the mid-30s by that point. To highlight the importance of the economy, since records began in 1929, there have been 6 instances of an incumbent party running for re-election during a struggling economy. From these, only one won, and that was quite possibly the biggest shock in US election history. Harry Truman defeating Thomas Dewey, much to the dismay of the Chicago Daily Tribune. Next, war. Since the first presidential election in 1788, the US has been involved in about a dozen major wars. In the 8 elections where the incumbent ran after the outbreak of a major war, all but one were elected. This phenomenon is often explained by the rally round the flag effect, a surge in public support for leaders during times of crisis. For example, George W. Bush's approval ratings sharply increased a few times during his first term. These often coincided with times of crisis: 9/11, the invasion of Iraq, and the capture of Saddam Hussein. And although his popularity gradually declined in the lead up to the 2004 election, these boosts gave him enough political capital to secure re-election. However, although the rally around the flag effect is very strong, there was that one incumbent who lost, and it's no surprise who it was. Remember, it's the economy, stupid. Next, turnout. Elections with low turnout favour the incumbent party. Out of the 25 such elections, the incumbent party won 72% of them. This compares to a 47% win rate in elections with high turnout. This is intuitive. Politically speaking, when people are relatively satisfied, they tend to disengage, in contrast to times when they are unsatisfied, where turnout is high as the electorate demands change. This pattern was evident in the 1920s, which was the decade that had the lowest average election turnout since the Civil War. It was dubbed the Roaring Twenties for a reason. Widespread economic prosperity left many Americans feeling content, with little desire for political change, resulting in the incumbent party winning in 1924 and 1928. Next, voter fatigue. Sometimes, people just want change. Only once since the 1950s has the same party ever won 3 elections in a row. This had been more common previously, with the longest run post-Civil War being 6 elections between 1860 and 1880. Actually, if it weren't for Grover Cleveland, it would have been 13 in a row, as he was the only non-Republican president between 1860 and the early 1900s. So what's behind this shift? Well, voter fatigue today comes from a mix of things, but a key aspect is the increased exposure to news and political commentary. Today, candidates often make big promises to get elected, inevitably falling short. Governing is a lot harder than campaigning. These failures are highlighted by the media, increasing public frustration. As a result, voters often end up voting for change, largely just for the sake of change. When people are struggling, they are often more willing to take risks, politically speaking, compared to when they are content. This is because they feel that they have little to lose, as the status quo already isn't working for them. A recent example of this was the 2016 election. At that time, 76% of people believed the government was run by a few big interests instead of for the benefit of all, reflecting widespread dissatisfaction with Washington. Because of this, many voters decided that they were fed up with the political elite and wanted an outsider to shake things up. Next, campaign. Focusing your campaign on the right states is crucial. So which states? Well, if we're only concerned with the data, New Mexico would top the list. Out of the 29 elections that New Mexico has participated in since it was admitted to the Union, it has voted for the winner 25 times. The rest of the top 5 states, in order, are Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Nevada. Interestingly, of the 4 elections in which New Mexico failed to vote for the winner, 2 were outliers, in which the winning candidate lost the popular vote. This suggests that New Mexico is an even better indicator of overall public sentiment than it first appears. Next, death. 8 presidents have died in office, and an interesting pattern emerges from the elections that followed. When the vice president runs in the subsequent election, such as Lyndon B. Johnson versus Barry Goldwater in 1964, they win 100% of the time. This also happened in 1904, 1924, and 1948. But when the vice president doesn't run, such as in 1884, the party loses, also 100% of the time. This also happened in 1844, 1852, and 1868. Of course, with only 8 cases, the sample size is too small to draw definitive conclusions, but the patterns are intriguing nonetheless. Next, age. Be 35 or older. No, seriously. As long as you are eligible to run, there is no major benefit to being a specific age. Well, with a couple of caveats. Number 1. There have been 3 major party candidates who ran while being younger than 40, and none of them won. This guy even lost on 3 separate occasions. So maybe scratch that. Be 40 or older. Number 2. This only concerns presidential election candidates, i.e., you have to have been nominated by your party. For example, although candidates in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s all win about half of the time after being nominated, some age brackets are a lot less likely to be nominated and hence win in the first place. Taking this into account, it's best to be in your 50s. Our previous conclusion, in which we accounted only for nominated candidates, is an example of selection bias. How about age gap? Well, the ideal scenario here is to be between 10 and 20 years older than your opponent. In the 21 elections where this has been the case, the older candidate won 15 of the times. There's no major difference in outcome with respect to other age gaps. Some examples where this age gap was present were 1860, 1984, 2012, and 2024. In 3 of these cases, the older candidate won. Next, facial hair. Not a good idea. The last person to be elected president who had facial hair was William Howard Taft over 100 years ago. Although, the vast majority of candidates don't sport any facial hair. The last major party candidate to do so was Thomas Dewey in 1948, who lost twice. Some pundits even argued that his facial hair was one of the reasons that he lost. Since 1788, 15 elections have featured a major candidate with facial hair. This was especially popular in the period between the start of the American Civil War and the end of World War I, with 13 such elections. Of these 15, 7 of them featured a matchup between a clean-shaven candidate and one that had facial hair. In these matchups, clean shaven fared better, winning 5. In the remaining contests, where both candidates had facial hair, beards did marginally better than moustaches. And finally, third parties. The presence of a major third-party candidate dropped the incumbent president's chance of re-election from 72% to 57%. As discussed earlier, this makes intuitive sense. Voters often become more open to radical change when things aren't going well, and radical change is often something represented by candidates outside the traditional two-party system. The most successful third-party candidate in history was ex-President Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, the only candidate since the Civil War to finish first or second in an election that wasn't part of the Democratic or Republican Party, but the Progressive Bull Moose Party. In this particular election, our trend holds up, as incumbent Republican President William Howard Taft came third, losing to Democratic nominee Woodrow Wilson. It's no surprise Theodore Roosevelt performed well despite the odds. His charisma, as well as his fiercely independent spirit, made him a formidable contender. During the 1912 election campaign, he was subject to an assassination attempt whilst delivering a speech. Despite being shot in the chest, he made sure his would-be assassin was not harmed and went on to finish his speech before accepting medical help. Due to potential complications with any surgery, the bullet would remain buried in his chest for the rest of his life. Just a badass fact that I thought I would share. So there we have it. Those are my top tips to becoming president. What do you think? Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments below. Just wanted to say a big thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more, please don't forget to like and subscribe. There will be more videos like this coming soon. Thank you.